Here we are with part 2 of our How to Make Great Decisions chapter for our Human Relations course. So now that we've looked at the types of decisions and what decision making is, let's address some of the models we can use to make decisions, including the rational decision making model, and then we'll also look at some cognitive errors or pitfalls in decision making. So the hardest thing to learn in life is which bridge to cross and which to burn, David Russell says. So we are starting with a quote. The hardest thing to learn in life is which bridge to cross and which to burn. I'm thinking dogs always pick the right bridge though. All right, here is the rational decision making model. And it has several steps, as you can see. So we'll talk about them here, and then we will talk a little bit about an example on the next slide. So this model is called the rational decision-making model, and it has the following steps. You start with identifying the problem. This should happen always, regardless of what decision-making model you're using. But you need to first identify the problem, and you should also write out a problem statement. What is it that you're trying to solve? A lot of the time we talk about problems here, but they can also be opportunities, right? So which opportunity you want to go after. Once you have done that, you have to identify the criteria. And the criteria are the things that are important in making this decision. So what are the things that are important to you? What are your values? What are the factors that you're looking at? So for instance, if you're buying a house, that might be location, size of the house, price of the house, right? You have not yet identified the houses, but you're looking at the criteria, the things that are important in the decision. Then you weight the criteria, meaning which of the criteria is most important. So I always like to add them up to 100%, or just 1.0. You don't have to do it that way, but I like it because it's easier math. So for instance, if you are looking to buy a house, you might say that that is 40%, because that's the most important thing. Location might be 20%. Size of the house might be 10%, etc. So you weight the criteria to show which one has the most importance, and that one should have the greatest weight. Now, in step number 4, we are actually looking at the alternatives. So here you will say, well, there's a house on Main Street, and there's a house on Wall Street, and there's a house on Town Street, and there's a house on Forest Street. So you come up with your alternatives in step number 4. Then in step number 5, we are going to do the math, and we're going to analyze the alternatives. So here you're going to take each of your alternative, and you are going to say, well, the house on Main Street has the cheapest price. The house on Wall Street has the most expensive price. The house on Forest Street has a price in the middle, right? So we are now analyzing the alternatives, and this might become a little bit more clear on the next slide. Once we have done that, we have analyzed the alternatives on each of the criteria. We make the decision, which is we just compute the number, and we will come up with a number. And so that number, assuming that the highest criteria shows you what is most important, the highest number will be the one that you pick. The alternative with the highest number is the one that you pick. So you make the decision. Here we make the decision, and then we actually evaluate the decision, right? So this is a feedback loop. How did we do? And if this is a smaller decision that you're doing at work, then you might actually have a feedback loop, and you can come back to the problem statement, you can come back to the criteria, you can come back to the weight of the criteria, etc. With a house purchase is different, right? It's unlikely that we will continuously go back and buy different houses, right? So it depends on what it is that you are solving for. So here we are looking at an example. And so let's just grab a different color pen here so we can see it a little bit better. So you can do this in Excel, you can do this paper or pen, however makes most sense for you. So we have the criteria, and these need to be identified, and they are listed in the column. So the problem that we're solving for here, because remember we're always starting with the problem statement, is that we're looking at which job we are going to go with. So before we actually get to the alternatives, the job themselves, we are going to list the criteria. So the problem statement is, which job are we choosing? Now we're going to come up with the criteria. And here we have salary, we have benefits, we have commute time, and we have developmental opportunities, right? And after we do that, we're going to weight them. Which one is most important? So as you see here, salary is the most important, 50% weight. Development opportunities next most important, 30%. And then each benefits 10 and commute time 10%, which adds up to a beautiful 100, just the way I like it. Okay, so now we have done that, we will actually look at the jobs themselves. So maybe I'll actually grab a different color pen. So we have job A and we have job B. Sometimes you can put them in the same table, sometimes you do different tables. It just depends on how you want to do it. And now we will start analyzing, okay? So we are going to say for job A, so I'm up top here, the salary for job A is a 5. That probably means that this one pays us more than the salary down here for job B, which is given a 3. Okay, and so what we are learning here is that we are using a 1 through 5 scale, where 5 is the most desirable, 5 is the best of whatever that criteria is, and 1 would be the worst, right? And again, this pen does whatever it wants. So 5 is best and 1 would be worst. So I'm just going to write that out because sometimes I'm stubborn, and even though I could move on, there we go. T, worst. All right. So you see what we're doing here. We're coming back to job A, and we are saying we're now going to look at benefits, right? So benefits for job A is a 5. Great benefits, amazing benefits. They cover dental and eye care and child care. They have everything that I'm looking for. And I'm also seeing that the benefits for job B isn't that great. So I'm going to give it a 1. They don't even have healthcare, even though we need to do that healthcare insurance here in this country nowadays. Okay, so on and so forth. So you rate each of the jobs on each of the criteria. And once we've done that, we are going to come through and we are now going to compute what we did. So we are going to take our number 5. I'm going to compute it by the 50% weight, and that ends up with the number, right? So 5 in the rating times 0.5 in the weight gives us 2.5. 5 in the rating times 10%, 0.1, gives us 0.5. And so we do that for each of the criteria, and then we end up with 3.7, right? So 3.7 is our final number. We do the same thing for job number B, and we end up with a 2.4, And because we are picking the job, the alternative that has the highest number, in this instance, it is job A, right? So job A is the one we are choosing, okay? So this is how we actually apply the rational model. And you can apply it to anything at work. You can apply it to things in your personal life, obviously. So here are some decision-making pitfalls to avoid. You have one called anchoring. Anchoring refers to pitfall in decision-making, which occurs when our judgment is clouded based on information that we have already been getting. So we have anchored information from prior. It anchors us to the information. However, the information may or may not be true, actually, which is then a problem, right? But our memory tends to stick on things we've already seen. The second one is the sunk decision. So when you feel trapped in a decision that you have made prior, and this pitfall often occurs due to our ego, which is big sometimes, because it's hard to admit when we've been making a bad decision or when we have done something in error. So we tend to stick to it even though it's not the best idea going forward. We also have status quo, which is when we are sticking with the things as they are. Because change can be difficult, it might seem easier to stick with what has already been done or stick with the current decision, and that is our status quo bias. We also have an overconfidence bias, and this occurs when we believe that our abilities or our competencies or the company we work for, their abilities or competencies are better than they really are. And this means that we are misleading ourselves, right? So it results in misleading of our own abilities or skills. So we're overconfident, which probably means we're not going to be doing as well as we could. Okay, so here we are going to talk about options for manager making the decision vis-a-vis the employees. So when should the manager make the decision and when should employees be part of the decision-making process? So managers obviously make decisions every day. Most of us do. All of us do. Some decisions like salary should be done by managers only. Some decision can be open to other people, right? On what day should we hold a team meeting? What should flex time look like? When should we be able to start work in the morning, etc.? So those type of decisions can be open to employees. So our first option here is called decide and announce. This is appropriate when those situations like salary or policy changes or safety or paid time off, management just makes the decision and then announces it. We have no employee participation here, and that's fine sometimes. But we can't use that all the time because that means that we will demoralize our employees. They will feel unappreciated. The second option is to present it and then invite comment. This option offers more participation than the last one, and it also allows people time to understand the reasoning and the rationale behind the decision. So here, employees are still not involved in the decision-making process, but they get to comment on it. They get to provide some sort of input or feedback. Thirdly, we can present the situation and invite discussion for a joint decision. This one is obviously more participative than the prior one, and it gives the employees a chance to speak their mind, and it allows you as the leader to look at the problem and the decision from their perspective. So whenever we can, this is the type of decision making we should use because it allows for buy-in from the employees. And of course, they might provide solutions and suggestions that we didn't think of, which is super. We also have a fourth situation, which is when we explain what is going on and then we ask the team to make the decision. This can be super effective depending on the development level and trust level. So if we have the trust there, it's a good idea. This allows employees to understand the situation, just make sure that they have all the information, all the data that they need. A pitfall here, a problem is if they make a decision as you ask them to, and then you choose to not follow through on it. You do something else, right? So the example here on this slide is you're hiring a new person, you form a hiring committee, the hiring committee picks a candidate, and then you decide to hire somebody else. Obviously, this will negatively affect morale. So be prepared to pick or go with whatever decision the team makes. You don't want to go against that decision. And then our last situation here is when the team determines the problem along with the possible solutions. So if the problem is unclear or our employees have data input that they can use, they can actually determine what the problem is. So write out the problem statement along with the possible solution. Same pitfalls as we just talked about. You must be ready to go with whatever the team decides. All right, so personal decision making. When making personal decision, we have two things to think about: our values as well as the goals. And these are things we've talked about plenty in this course. And we want to make sure that both the values and the goals that we have are clear for us. So we want to revisit that every so often. So when making these personal decisions, the values, what is important for you, will guide you to choose the right decision. So if you're looking for a new job and you know that family is important to you, time is important to you, those things will help you guide the decision to take. In terms of your goals, these should be both your short-term and your long-term goals. And the example here is your goal is to become a regional sales manager. You are now offered the district sales manager, but it's a step down for you. Or a digital marketing manager, which would be a lateral move. Which one do you pick? Well, if the goal is to become a regional sales manager, you would pick the district sales manager, even though it is a step down, because that is in the direction that you want to go. So knowing your values and knowing your goals make it easier for you to apply the rational decision-making model, because we know where we are headed. Exercises include: address a recent decision that you've made and discuss how you went through each step of the rational decision-making model. Secondly, discuss the types of bias that exist with decision-making. How can you alleviate these biases? So in summary, the rational decision-making model consists of multiple steps and allows you to make decisions by way of an organized process. And I encourage you to try it out. There are several pitfalls to avoid when making decisions, including anchoring, sunk decisions, status quo, and overconfidence bias. There are a variety of ways you can make management decisions. Some involve little or no input from employees. Others allow to identify the problem and make the final decision. When making personal decisions, considering values and goals is an important part of the process. That's it for right now, and have a good one, and I'll see you next time.